Jane Yeh has been known to the Irish literary community since 2003, when David Weekly and Justin Quinn published her debut chapbook, Teen Spies, under their imprint Meter editions. As the name of that press implies, Quinn and Weekly were at the time closely associated with the tail end of the new formalism movement. Doubtless they were drawn to Yeh by what has been described by the UK Poetry Archive as work characterised by its high artifice, rich and varied diction. But for me, the most distinctive and beguiling aspect of Yeh's work is her imagination, what the same site goes on to describe as poems of deep psychological penetration, touching and sinister. Yeh's poems tackle the truth the way Jan Wagner's and Matthew Sweeney's poems do, slantwise. Anything confessional and autobiographical in her poems is mitigated by and sieved through thwarted and suspicious fictional characters, protagonists who evoke an atmosphere of sadness, alienation and desire, which the Poetry Archive again describes as realised with such wit and tenderness that the poems somehow become miniature celebrations of the character's dignity and endurance. Jane Yeh is an American poet who's lived in England for over a decade. Born in New Jersey, she was educated at Harvard University and the University of Iowa, where she took an MFA. At Manchester Metropolitan University, she's taught at a number of universities in the UK, including Oxford Brookes, and is now a senior researcher in creative writing at Kingston. She's published 2 collections of Carcanet, Marabou, which was nominated for the Forward Prize for Best First Collection, the Whitbread Book Award, and Gerwood Aldeburgh First Collection Prize. And I hope all those juries are ashamed of themselves. None of them awarded the prize to that book. What's even more shameful is that the Ninjas was likewise treated. And the Ninjas, I thought like Marabou was a great book, but the Ninjas is so brilliant. It puts even Marabou in the shade. She's received many other awards and fellowships for her work, including a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellowship, an Academy of the American Poets Prize, residency at Yeh D.A, and was a judge herself for the 2013 National Poetry Competition. She's also written on a number of subjects, from fashion to sport, including the Village Voice and the Times Literary Supplement. Please welcome Jane Yeh.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and thank you to the festival and everyone involved in it for having me, and thank you all especially for coming out tonight to listen to this reading. So I'm just putting my timer on so that I know how long I've been reading. Okay, so the first poem is called On Ninjas, and I guess just in case you don't know, ninjas are these figures from like Japanese folklore and history who were these kind of super assassins. You know, they're in Western pop culture a lot, but in the poem, I guess, I'm just making up my own ideas about ninjas. And kind of in the middle of the poem, I use the phrase cater waiters, which I guess is more American slang than over here. So it just means like the wait staff that are hired at fancy events to walk around with the trays of drinks and canapes. On ninjas. They eat 4 cheese pizzas with 3 of the cheeses removed. They make friendship bracelets out of aluminium foil and poison. They open windows just by thinking about opening windows. They take ballet lessons to improve the speed of their circular arm movements. The ninjas are coming to save us from muggers and disorganized thieves and slobs who want to kill us. The way to spot a ninja is to look for someone wearing black pajamas, preternaturally neat black pajamas, with a hood for cover. The way to tell one ninja from another is by the ankles. The way to tell one ninja from another is, you can't. They know how to levitate by thinking about birds' feet. They make terrible cater waiters because no one can hear them coming. Their mission is to save us from chaos with their acute humbling skills and their climbing proficiency. They don't want to dismember bad jazz musicians or art teachers or con men, but they will. They know how to escape from a trap by running in place very, very fast. They can change places with each other by thinking about numbers. They turn themselves into fog to get out of attending boring parties. They make single-serving Lancashire hot pots to show their culinary mastery. They take turns doing the laundry. It's easy, no whites or colors. The ninjas are here to help us. They are as ruthless as history or defenestration. They are pitiless as a swarm of bees or evolution. They know how to throw fireballs and do their own taxes. They hate litter and small children. They are here to fix us. So the next poem has this quite long title because it's a quote from an article I was reading. Before they filmed the first of the Harry Potter movies, there was a lot of speculation on who would be cast in all of the main roles. And in the middle of this article it said, the only confirmed cast member is Ook the owl, who has been tapped to play the snowy white owl who delivers mail for Harry. So I was really interested in the idea of this owl who's like a professional. So the poem is just in the voice of this owl. The only confirmed cast member is Ook the owl, who has been tapped to play the snowy white owl who delivers mail for Harry. Claw up, claw down, cut. My fine eyes are cut. I was fluffed and plucked like a beauty pageant winner, between takes, like a news presenter. Could I be a news presenter? Rider, 5 rashers bacon, 8-ounce tin mixed nuts, 2 pounds rabbit fillets, assorted droops. Between takes, I did leg lifts in my trailer. If asked, what is your most treasured possession? I would say, the woolly toy Tracy, my personal trainer, gave me when young. I learned to spy it from afar, then swoop down and seize, but only on cue. Mr. Sheep goes everywhere with me now. If I could wake up having gained one ability, it would be the capacity for more facial expression. It is so tedious to have one's beak set in a permanent frown. My greatest talent is impersonation, to simulate a person's idea of an owl. Sadly, I owe my success to typecasting. My greatest fear is to be found wanting. At the premiere party, the women were not very clothed. It is of advantage to be clad always in feathers. I allowed fake friends to pet me. My picture was taken several times with the boy. I enjoy parties because otherwise I see only Tracy. Afterwards, you wonder what the glitter was for. Sorry, I'm just going to take... So I guess I'm going to read a couple of new poems, so they'll be in my collection that comes out sometime next year that still doesn't have a title, unfortunately. But I was asked to write a poem for an anthology, edited actually by people that I guess you might know, Nessa O'Mahony, the Irish poet, and Paul Munden. So it was asking poets to write poems that reflect in some way on Ovid's Metamorphosis. So I had heard, in the way that you do, like some of the famous bits of the Metamorphoses, like Apollo and Daphne. Daphne was changed into a laurel tree, or Arachne, who was changed into a spider, Narcissus, changed into a flower. But I didn't want to do any of the sort of obvious ones, and so I read the actual Metamorphoses in translation, of course. And it turned out it was full of like hundreds of these little stories, most of which are not famous and like aren't even covered in much detail. So I kind of picked out some randomy details from it to put together into this poem, and then added more random details of my own. And the other thing that struck me was that he mentions centaurs a bunch of times in different stories, but they're always male. And then I thought, oh, what if there were women centaurs? In case you don't know, a centaur is like, the half man, half horse kind of creature. So the poem's just called A Short History of Mythology. To be a lady centaur, leaping across the hedgehog isles, is to be in heaven and wearing a tropical lei. Like a shower of spiral curls, my tail is springy. It smells like violets and shit, in a good way. Thank you, pool. I can bounce down a peninsula laden with gorgonzola, harvesting bites between watching my shows and inventing the handsaw. Between weaving a tapestry and visiting space, I will stomp on a few thousand years of lady centaur history without regrets. To leap through a waterfall in a novelty t-shirt, holding a gift basket between my teeth. To shake my legs around, pretending to be a freaky spider. To investigate a mole all day, or whatever is stealing my tomatoes, is a paradise. Like a partridge, my head bobs when I run. My boobs bob when I run. When I run into the purple-tinged hills, I can be mythical. Like the very specific flower they use in salads in LA as a garnish. If you look at it upside down, you can see the face of a furious boy. So this next poem, I guess, is a kind of portrait of the performer and performance artist named Joey Arias, who's American. And when I lived in New York in the late 1990s, he was really famous and successful for doing a kind of act or one-man show where he would perform the songs of Billie Holiday, and he was in drag, but not drag as Billie Holiday, just in his own style. But it was really uncanny the way that vocally he could imitate her songs, and obviously it was a kind of homage to her artistry. So I'd heard a lot about this, but I only got to see him perform once, actually. And so this is just kind of a description of her performance. It's called A Short History of Style. The disposition of her arms is a case of nothing ventured, nothing gained. Her violet ear makes sense if something wicked is being said. The angle of her nose is a challenge, a crime against nature. Her throat a fine line. Lover, where have you been? Mistakes come back like wrong notes, a clarinet of echoes. You can take the boy out of Dubuque. Nothing like bourbon to make her sing a slow tune. Downcast eyes, hands swaying just so. The catch in her voice like a rusty key turned. 100 nights blurred together like an ink blot smeared. Her long fall of hair saying no, no, no. This poem is, I guess I tend to write a lot of poems that are kind of inspired by paintings, more or less. And I used to do a lot of kind of old master paintings because I actually really like a lot of them. But in recent times, I've been trying to be sort of more contemporary. And also, obviously, most of these old masters were white men. So I'm trying to be more diverse in kind of what I'm choosing. So this was a painting by a contemporary artist that I know in London named Kirsten Glass. The painting was called Discipline, so I used the title of it for my own poem. Discipline. The shape of a deer in silhouette projected on a woman's dress. Off with her arms, her head. The mark of a hoof in snow, superimposed on a high heel, a pool of milk. The lines converge and part like migrating birds. Her skirt is an hourglass filling up with stones. Her heart is a caveat. See how they run. If her foot points towards the past, it's called composition. Too much thinking spoils a fawn. Her secrets play on continuous loop, like a B movie. On the reverse, a blank surface painted over, another girl blotted out. Sorry, that went much faster than I was expecting, so I have to find one of my other poems to read as well. Okay. So this one was inspired by something I read in the news, which was this baby panda in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago. It was born in the zoo, and then when it turned 4, it was shipped back to China to a panda conservation center, because that's the deal that you have to make with the Chinese government if you have pandas on display in your zoos. That when they breed, the offspring always have to go back to China. So people had, this baby panda had a lot of fans in Washington, or like people would come from long distances to see it because it was really cute and stuff. So people were really sad when it left. And then, so I guess I just wrote this poem in the voice of the panda. So it's called An American Panda Leaves the National Zoo. I don't want to go. Give me another ice lolly the size of a tire with pear chunks in it. I'm too important to be sent away from my custom-built grotto, my waterfall, and my floofy bedding. There's a sweet potato waiting behind a rock for my long claws to pierce it. Another I hid in a bush for later. I don't want to go play with 150 strange pandas in China. Why can't I stay here and fondle a leafy stalk? All I want is to flop and loaf on my belly for hours like a furry hippo. People of Washington, this is the last time I'll comically fall off a branch for you, or get my tongue stuck while licking a fruity tire, or adorably flail my ungainly pancake-like paws as I lie on my back, unable to get up. Will they have webcams in China? I don't want to live like a wild panda with no one watching. I love you, rocky outcrop, where I clambered as a baby. Love my electronic feeding chute and the llamas next door. A cranky bunch, but they always look like they're smiling. I don't want to give them up. When spring comes to this time zone, the cherry trees will start to snow, shedding their petals in a maelstrom of forgetting. Who knows what makes them do it? I'll love them till I die. This is the last place where people will speak to me in English, or play popular music to see if I'll dance, or make kissy faces at me from behind a glass wall. Adios, keepers. Adios, observers. Adios, playful otters. Adios, haters. There are always a few. I don't want to know about the future. It always gets here, sooner or later. Okay, I'm just going to read 2 short poems to finish. So, okay, this one actually was weirdly written kind of in homage to Emily Berry's style, or sort of the style of some of the poems in her first collection. And then weirdly, someone told me the first few words of the poem are in our house. And then someone told me she actually has a poem where the first 3 words are in our house, which I might have read, I don't remember anything, so I hope you don't mind. It's called A Short History of Silence. In our house, all the clocks are turned off and the mirrors don't work. We sit like bread in a stay fresh wrapper, keep ourselves to ourselves. Sometimes the speeches are so beautiful it hurts. On the porch where we can't be seen to smile, the honeysuckle meshes with silent leaves. We rock back and forth in our long black dresses. Mosquitoes taste our blood and find it good. Inside, candles are lit every night and keep going until they burn themselves down. We kiss our fingers to our lips like Italians, promise we'll never look back. Whippoorwill. When the doorbell rings, we don't answer. In winter, the fur grows long on the horses, and the ice grows long on the eaves. We sleep in the same bed, like good animals, braid our hair together, tailor our limbs to fit. Conspiracy of wood. And the last poem, I guess I often like to read because it's the only really cheerful or kind of upbeat poem I've ever written. And so near the beginning of it, I use the word edema, which is a medical term I learned from watching ER in Grey's Anatomy. It just means like an unnatural swelling of an organ or tissues. And then near the end of the poem, I use the French phrase bonne journée, which I'm told means have a nice day. This morning, the romance of the world washed over me. My heart swelled with positive feelings, not edema. The forklift out the window beeped, "I love you," in Morse code. A curious pigeon molested my bird feeding contraption. I pined longingly for my absent biscuits, which had been eaten last week. Even the unfriendly cat sensed the fragility of the moment and refrained from licking its bits. How sweet it was to breathe the sausage-scented air and feel the throb of the washing machine like a second heart, keeping me true. In the garden, a host of petunias dangled and waved their skinny limbs. Oh, darlings, some days are painted with high saturation pigment. Some are faint as a blueprint seen from space. Today, the bees are droning a hosanna to wish me bonne journée. It's ridiculous to be so full of honey for a living. It's ridiculous how ardently the washing machine sings. Dear pigeon, I used to be a heretic from the world. Then romance washed over me. I think I might believe. Thank you so much.
Powell was born in Georgia, not the one the Beatles sang of, the one rhapsodized by Ray Charles, as one would expect an American, I guess. He lives and works in San Francisco, also the city of Tom Gunn and August Kleinzahler. His first three collections of poetry, Tea, Lunch, and Cocktails, are considered by some to be a trilogy on the AIDS epidemic. Lunch was a finalist for the National Poetry Series, and Cocktails was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry. His next two books were Chronic, which won the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Useless Landscape or Guide for Boys, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award of Poetry again. Poet Carl Phillips observed on awarding Powell the 4th Annual Boston Review Poetry Prize, "Here is work that manages to be entirely of the moment, while at every turn it announces, without preening over it, not merely in awareness, but in actual confidence with such prosodic traditions as the heroic couplet and pentameter line, such cultural and literary traditions as those of the Old Testament and of meaningfully comic punning." Stephanie Burt has said of Powell, "No accessible poet of his generation is half as original, and no poet as original is this accessible." It was the surface glitter of Powell's style, the muscularity and gracile sinuousness of his syntax, his bejeweling vocabulary deployed without putting a metrical foot wrong, which first drew me in. But it is the rawness and detail of his emotional landscape which has kept me hanging around. Powell is shaping up to be, as Derek Mahon is, a poet's poet. Please give him a clap.
Thank you so much. This is my first time in Ireland. And what a better excuse to come here than to read with my old classmate, Yeh D.A, who I haven't seen since graduate school. So it's been a wonderful reunion. And thank you so much for sharing all of your poetry here and around the world. We need it. I don't know if you know what's going on in America, but okay, we have no secrets. So I'm glad to be away. I'm going to start with a poem that actually ends my most recent book, or last book, depending on it. I hate to use that term, but this is called Mass for Pentecost, Canticle for Birds and Waters, based on the story of St. Francis, the patron saint of San Francisco, where I live. There is no cause to grieve among the living or the dead, so long as there is music in the air. And where the water and the air divide, I'll take you there. The levee, aureate with yellow thistles, white moth, wasp, and dragonfly. We could not wish unless it were on wings. Give us our means and point us toward the sun. Will the Spirit come to us now on the pewter paten of the air, the fluted call of dabbler drakes, the deadpan honk of the white-fronted goose, the tule goose, tongues confused in the matchstick rushes. High, high the baldpate cries, and in the air, the red-winged blackbirds chase the damselflies. Triumph over death with me, and we'll divide the air. I'm oddly mirroring Jane's reading here. She read a poem about an owl. I'm going to read a poem about an owl. This poem is made up out of owl parts. It's got the vowel from the owl and the consonant, and also that letter that is sometimes a vowel and sometimes a consonant and sometimes it's silent. So I was trying to find all of the sounds within the owl, and this is called First Strains. Owl, oh owl, low owl, low owl, owl, oh owl, ooh owl, ooh owl, low, low owl, low owl, oh owl, oh owl, oh, oh owl, low owl, oh owl. Thank you. It's hard when you're working with 3 letters. I should have chosen a longer word.
It's really about Robert Lowell.
Yeah. Lowell. This poem is about a dog. Because people always say, you know, when are you going to read your poem about a dog? So I'm going to get that out of the way fairly quickly here. This is called My Life as a Dog. If I was a dog, the only 3 things I'd chase, a fire truck, a ball, and my own tail. If I was a dog, you wouldn't be petting me. I might have rolled in something. As a dog, I'd roll over for cheese. Not very good cheese. I'd bark all night until you let me out. You'd have to let me out. Don't worry, I wouldn't chase anyone's cat. I'm sure I'd think about it, but I just wouldn't. Someone would have to hold me when I got my shots. Would you hold me when I got my shots? I'd sneak into the garden and eat the pears off the trees. How would I do that? I'd be a dog. A crafty dog. If I was a dog, I would have run away by now. I'd be a runaway. You'd think, bad dog. And when it was time to put me down, you'd be a little blue. Then put me down. All right, so this is my Stanley Kubrick poem. I don't know why I wrote this. Seriously. But that happens sometimes. You know, you can't account for inspiration. It just comes to you. This title is taken from a Michael Cimbello song. It's called "He's a Maniac." And you'll hopefully recognize the movie. I won't even tell you. Stanley Kubrick did make a couple films. This is one. In the Stanley Kubrick movie of your life, you are an isolated man going slowly mad in the drunken pillory of the snow, chasing a little version of yourself with an axe, because that's what every hour is doing, chasing you. Vexing, isn't it? How often you've tried to write your story, but the apparitions won't let you, and the bottle calls from the ballroom, whispers of every dead season at the Overlook Hotel. It seems you've played this role before. Why can't you just have closure? It's a horror movie, stupid. The villain returns. You are the villain. Any second last thoughts? And when I get back to the States, I'm going to see Bananarama, or as they say in Europe, Bananarama. So this is my Bananarama song. Cruel, cruel summer. Either the postage stamp bright inflorescence of wild mustard, or the drab tassel of prairie smoke waving its dirty garments. Either the low breeze through the cracked window, or houseflies and drawn blinds to spare us the callid sun. One day commands the next to lie down, to scatter. We're done with allegiance, devotion, the malicious idea of what's eternal. Picture the terrain sunk, return of the inland sea, your spectacle, your metaphor, the scope of this twiggy dominion pulled under, crest and crest, wave and cloud, the thunder blast and burst of swells. This is the sum of us, brief sneezeweed, brief yellow blaze put out, so little your departure. One plunk upon the earth's surface, one drop to bind the dust, a little mud, a field of mud, the swale gradually submerged, gradually forgotten. And that is all that is to be born of your empirical trope. First, a congregated light, the brilliance of a meadowland in bloom, and then the image must fail as we must fail, as we, graceless creatures that we are, unmake and befoul our beds. Don't tell me deluge. Don't tell me heat, too damned much heat. So I'm going to read a couple of poems that are built on lists. This poem, people are always talking about confessional mode in poetry, the idea that the poet is using his or her own life as a springboard into talking about the conditions of our relation to the world. And sometimes people will use that word in describing my poetry, confessional. And I think, well, I might be confessing things, but not things that I did. I mean, you know, like you can be confessional and still not be telling the truth. So I wanted to write a confessional poem that confessed nothing. And so this poem is entirely built out of titles of movies that have an implied I in the title, an I or a me. It's called Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. I was a male war bride. I was a spy. So I married an axe murderer. I married Joan. I married a monster from outer space. I am guilty, I am the cheese, I am a fugitive from a chain gang. Maybe I'll come home in the spring. I'll cry tomorrow. Whose life is it anyway? It's a wonderful life. I want to live. I want someone to eat cheese with. Who am I this time? I am Cuba. I am a sex addict. Why was I born? Why must I die? I could go on singing. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I know who killed me. I was 19, I was a teenage werewolf. Just kill me, kiss me, kill me later, kill me again. Give me a sailor. If I had my way, I'd rather be rich. I wouldn't be in your shoes. I wish I had wings. I wish I were in Dixie. I passed for white. I was framed. I was a burlesque queen. I was a teenage zombie. I was an adventuress. I was a convict. I was a criminal. I did it. I killed that man. Murder is my beat. I confess. I'm fascinated by collective nouns. A leap of leopards, a smack of jellyfish, a shrewdness of apes, a charm of finches, or is it a charm of nightingales?
Finches.
Finches. Good. All right, so you know all the ones for animals, right? And I was thinking, are there any for plants? This is called, is there something like murder for trees? A fall of oaks, a strip of birches, a sob of willow, a strand of beeches, an inferno of white ash, an inferno of mountain ash, a slap of palms, a clap of date palms, a jig of saw palmetto, crop of poplars, flash of sassafras, pitch of pines, a rash of strawberry trees, a pack of sweet gums, a few of you. Was that too much? It's still, I'm going to work with that. When I was growing up, when people would ask where I was from, I would always use this word. People have all sorts of words for those places that aren't really incorporated towns, the sticks. So my word was boonies. And I realized when I was writing a book about where I grew up that I hadn't used that word in the entire book. So I decided I would write a poem called Boonies. Where we could be boys together, this region of want, the campestral flat, the adolescents roving across the Platte, come hither. He of the hardwood, call me hither. Sheer abdomen, sheer slick insides, the feldspar buttes that mammillate the valley right where it needs to bust. And I could kiss his tits and he could destroy me on the inflorescent slopes, in his darkest dingles, upon the grassland's raffish plates. And he could roll me in coyote brush. I who was banished to the barren could come back into his fold, and I would let him lay me down on the cold, cold ground. Clouds above, lenticular, the spreading fundament, a glorious breach among the thunderheads, and in their midst, a great white heron magnifies the day. We'd keep together, he and I, and we'd gain meaning from our voyage. We'd pursue each other through the crush of darkling rifts, climb into each other's precipitous combs. Where would it end, this brush and bush, this brome and blazing star? There is always some new way to flex a limb and find its secret droop. Not only the hope of nature, but the nature of hope. So long as culverts carry us, so long as we stay ripe to one another's lips and welcoming to hands, as long as we extend our spans to tangle them as spinning insects do their glistered floss. This is not a time to think the trumpet vine is sullen. Rather, the trumpet's bell is but a prelude. It says, we all are beautiful at least once. And if you watch over me, we can be beautiful again. As I was writing about this place that I grew up, I began to worry about my role as an artist, writing about a place that I was describing as exploited and overdeveloped. And I was thinking, am I exploiting this place now too? So I had to be mindful of my relationship to place and to take a step back and think, well, what is the role of an artist in relationship to location? This poem began actually as a seed catalog, as a list of the fauna and flora of the Central Valley of California. It's called Tender Mercies. It takes its title, actually it takes its title from a movie, but the movie takes its title from the Gospel according to Matthew. Tender mercies, the dandelions, ditch-blown brood, the evening snow and dew-soaked flocks, the brewer's pea, the Jepson's pea, these the bright eyes of the Viridian fields, in chaparral, the hillside pea and angled pea, intensities of light and pomp that distress the easy upswept grass. The smack the rain plants as it smudges past and penetrates the canvas, the smattering on field and railroad tracks, both hardy blooms and dainty flowers. The judge's house, the chicken farm, a migratory camp, a flesh motel, a stucco digs where all that mitigates the August swelter is the swamp cooler's immutable burr. A straggling house that draws its water from a hard water well and flushes out with the help of a crude sump pump. Before the flat land is occluded by the staunch of light at end of day, I wanted to be content with all its surfaces. Weed, barb, crack, rill, rise. But every candid shoot and fulgent branch depends upon the arteries beneath. The houses have their siphons and their circuit vents. The heart, the literal heart, must rely upon its own plaqued valves. The duodenal canal is unremitting grumble. The brain upon its stem and underneath a network vast of nerves that rationalize. The earth's a little harder than it was, but I expect that it will soften soon, voluptuous in some age hence, because we captured it as art the moment it was most itself, fragile, flecked with nimble weed, and so alone it almost welcomed its own ravishment. I was a maiden in this versicolor plane. I watched it change, withstood the change, the infidelities of light, the solar interval, the shift of time, the shift from farm to town. I had a man that pressed me down into the soil. I was that man. I was that town. They call the chicory ragged sailors here, sojourners who have finally returned and are content to see the summer to its end. Be unafraid of what the future brings. I will not use this particular blue again. It's true, you really have no sense of time once you stand up in front of people. But I think this is my last poem. I hope I'm not cutting you short or going on too long. This poem takes its title. In my last book, I stole a lot of the titles. That was by design, it turned out, because I was writing about California, a place of stolen titles. And so this poem takes its title from a song by the Eurythmics. It's about a relationship that I had when I was very young. You have such relationships with a Mormon missionary. Like so many of you. It's called Missionary Man, and it has two epigraphs. Two epigraphs, the first by Oscar Wilde, local boy, and the second by Isaiah. So it's the sacred and profane. We must bear away the body to another place, Oscar Wilde, Salome. Then said I, here am I, send me, Isaiah 6:8. The product of poor radiography, this one rectangular window through which the faintest of flowers might be seen. As each plastered vegetative eye awoke in traction and sought to be dismissed from the unreliable dispensary to which it was tied, so too did I petition to be moved into any upper room that might have me. Let the next who comes invite me so. If night can take it, shall we thread it like a spider? Glance around its unlit cistern, complecting our moonstruck strands toward the vortices we've kept from thus exploring. Let him knock with a promise of books, good looks, cutaway collar, skinny black tie, the pocket protector with his name engraved. For the bandages were still to be unwound. Had I ever thought about being saved? No. I had only ever thought about being spent. And unmended in my bones, I fostered such attraction to this ardent host. Himself, the aseptic, argent lancet brought to pierce me in my side. It was his first penetrating glance that filled me with a sudden surge of blood, rack, rent, and bungle of my corpus. Let me say, I stank like the rim of hell in all my lust, and would have blushed at my own heat if not for the shameless eagerness in his eyes. The world is full of lovely but tragic boys. Get me on the joy bus, I said. Nobody ever really rides the joy bus. He prepared a place for me in empty houses, received me in the shaded summer lawns, wrapped in our own light jackets at the river bottoms, hid in manzanita clumps, the brake, the brittle fern, in the foyer of a Pentecostal church where we took our gladness to spite the pious. Took the praise of God as an offering of our bodies, each of us crouched in the doorway in turn, mouth to the vine, lips to the Eucharist, flesh of my astonished flesh. John, my elder, John, my boy, the body is dead to us, naughty, then gone. Suffer me to kiss thy mouth, John, I will kiss thy mouth. Let him be born of every ash that glows in the oil drums of winter parks. Let lesions disappear. Let brittle bones be knit. Let the integrity of every artery be restored. There is no God, but that which visits us in skin and thew and pleasing face. He offers us this body. By this body we are saved.
Pizza doesn't arrive for another 20 minutes yet. It'll be enough for everybody in the audience. So we've usually able to spend 10 minutes having a chat at pizza anyway.
And people get a slice of pizza by asking their questions.
There's enough for everybody in the audience. So there's even vegetarian pizza, but if you're vegan, you just have to eat the chips. Okay, just before we get into discussion, I want to say, American publishers think they have distribution on this side of the Atlantic. They do, but it's not effective distribution. So unfortunately, we don't have any of Doug's books here this evening. We do have Jane's books because she's published by the wonderful Carcanet Press. Doug's books you'll have to get on the internet. Or steal them. And I'll be guarding mine with a shotgun tonight. Anyway, somebody once wrote a book called something like What I Didn't Learn at Harvard Business School. What did you not learn at Iowa?
What did we learn?
It seems like
It was so long ago, and I don't know if learning was really the point there. I mean, you think higher education is about filling people with knowledge, but the program there is kind of unique in that they really don't want to do anything that's going to take you away from your writing. That they feel like all of the learning is happening inside through the practice of talking about each other's poems, sometimes to the point of nausea. But, so what did I not learn? Well, I didn't learn Jack, really, in that way. But yeah, I learned how to make a space for other people to write. That was really important.
I guess the thing for me was, in a way, I often felt like I was sort of wasting this great opportunity because when I got there, I kind of had quite a lot of writer's block, and I just didn't feel. I kept trying to write, like I would start a poem and it'd be all right, and then I would just not know what to do next or how to get out of it.
And Jane's such a meticulous craft person, so she would really.
That's true. I write really slowly, unfortunately. But yeah, so I guess what I didn't learn was how to help myself, or like that. Because now I teach, so when I students who say, "Oh, I have writer's block," or "I've started this poem and I don't know what to do next," I sort of, I guess, have these strategies, most of which are stolen from other really good teachers. But I can give them advice, sort of. Whereas I guess no one was sort of giving that kind of advice. You were just, I think, supposed to figure it out for yourself.
We were kind of abandoned as students. All of our instructors were off winning awards. We were in Jory Graham's class. She got the Pulitzer Prize, and we didn't see her again the rest of the semester.
On the subject of making space for other people to write, came across an interview somewhere where you talked about an interesting experiment you did with a class once, where you got them to write on not the usual or expected paper medium. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I asked them to write with an implement that they would normally not use, on a surface that they would normally not use. And they wrote on toilet paper rolls and paper plates and carved into candles. One kid spray painted on an American flag. Sonoma State. I felt like having them change the medium would help to change the message, and it taught me something then about my own work, which was to not pay attention to boundaries, because we're so influenced by that 8.5 by 11 white space that we think the poem happens here, and by allowing for it to be some other kind of surface, you can let the poem grow in other ways that it might not feel permission.
I really want to write on paper plates because it makes me
machine tape. All kinds of things. It's like, oh yes, I could be doing this. I just read Tommy Pico's book. He's a Native American poet lives in New York, and he writes on his phone, and so he gets these long, skinny poems. It's like, James Schuyler had to work really hard to come up with that skinny line. If only someone had handed him an iPhone. Problem solved or problem presented.
So, Jane, for somebody who writes slowly, what is your process?
Well, it's definitely not one I would recommend to anybody. I guess just, obviously it's changed over time, but I guess maybe unlike most poets I actually know, like who write kind of in verse or when they can find time outside of their regular job, obviously. But like I do kind of try to write every day, even if it's just for like half an hour or an hour. And obviously most of the time what comes out is not great or not really even that usable. But because I only started doing that maybe about 10 years ago. And so I found it really helpful just because it did make me stop having this kind of writer's block, or, even if I wrote something and I knew it wasn't good, or I looked at it the next day and didn't like it, I had done something, and like, I guess it's just true, like you're sort of, it's like doing warm-up scales on the piano or whatever, like it just gets you thinking or going. So my friend Amy Woolard, who's this really amazing American poet, she's furious when writers, give this advice of trying to write every day because she thinks it it doesn't work for her, obviously. I know it doesn't work for a lot of people, but for me, it actually does kind of help. Okay. Are you one of these people that writes just like, certain times of the year you have some time?
I will write in large, like I'll really be on a tear for a while, and then I'll have a fallow period that might be 2 years. I mean, and I don't worry about that because I feel like the real work is happening in those times when you're just letting stuff sort of work on you. I mean, poetry is 97% input and 3% output. And I don't know where I come up with those numbers.
Any queries from the floor? Michael?
No, I just have a suggestion. There was a few years ago, there was a poet here at a festival in Ireland from Mexico called Miriam Moscona. She lives in New York. And she wrote poems on tortillas. So you could read the poem and then eat it.
Yeah. That's very practical.
Yeah, we had a poem today who had a poem on a loaf of bread. Each slice had a poem on it.
I tried it once on rice paper. When I was 16, I went to a poetry reading where Jerry Murphy read from pieces of paper and then nonchalantly tossed them into the audience. And I said, okay, I'm going to write mine on rice paper and eat them at it. You know how long it takes to masticate one sheet of wood?
It's not as edible as you think it should be.
Not at all. John?
Could I just ask Jane about the role of whimsy in your poems? I mean, judging away from the ninjas, it seems to be kind of a strong element. I was struck that you said that that poem, Edema, it was your only cheerful one. But to the superficial observer, the others seem quite frisky. I mean, do you think that it's hiding a deep non-cheerfulness, or
I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is maybe like the difference between how you perceive your own work and how other people do. Like, I guess I sort of think I am kind of a depressed person, so things that I write are kind of not depressive, but like, sort of somber. I don't know. And I don't write like love poems or like, poems that people write that might have more like uplifting moods in them or whatever. So, I mean, I guess as far as whimsy, like, that's really just sort of to entertain myself while I'm writing. Like, I feel like I have quite a short attention span, so I get bored easily. And I just kind of want to write something that isn't boring to me. And then hopefully it isn't boring to other people, though obviously it might be, or it might just be annoying.
Okay, you might want to get drinks before the pizza arrives. Not to mention Jane's book, which we have outside.